Hey, is this thing on? Oh, it's rolling? Oh, okay. All right, so wow, you know how many times I done went through so many bloopers on a podcast? Man, listen, man, if I just learned just you just gotta roll with it. You know what I mean? That's what this thing is all about. So today I want to get into a discussion of, creating your own podcast. So originally, when I first got into podcasting, I was kind of skeptical about it. Getting in front of a camera and just the whole setting up a microphone and talking into a mic to, discussing whatever, interests I like to do. I was kind of skeptical about it, but I found out it's like a great platform to, showcase my works and, what I like to do in life, showcasing my, other ventures, stuff that I like to do, such as like photography, videography work, my music, and so forth. So I want to say, and if you're good at something, if you want to, showcase your works and show what you like to do, and uh, creating a podcast is a great platform for you. So, for an example, if you like to make music, you can talk to people about your music, why you got into music, how you come up with your music, the production, the editing, especially if you're a solo musician doing everything on your own. Excuse me, y'all. You want to, show your fan base how you come up with that one song, how you came up with that idea, and you can do it all in the form of a podcast. And like I stated earlier, I think it was in my past episode one when I first started. Believe it or not, I stated that making a podcast is a great way, to show your talent, your skills, and people will admire you. People will be inspired. So go out there today and create your podcast. And so starting out with a podcast, I'm just basically giving you a brief tour of how I set mines up. I'm doing this on a website called Anchor, and I'll see if I can post a description in the box below of this video. If you're listening to this on audio, you're not going to see this. So go on my YouTube channel, The Rod Pod, and you can see this video version of this podcast. So, by the way, this is episode. We're in 9. Okay, so this is episode 9 right here, the Rob John podcast. So you already know, here with the life topics, and I might speak knowledge. Welcome to the Rob John podcast, episode 9. So getting back to the subject. So when I make my podcast, I go on a website called Anchor, and basically it's just like a website that helps you to make the distribution on your podcast. So it could basically go on that your podcast could go on that main site called Anchor, and it has other platforms where that podcast is linked out to other audio sites or streaming sites, such as like Spotify. Your podcast can also go on Apple Music and other platforms as well. So again, I'll share that link in the description box below of this video. So like I said, you might be afraid to of doing a podcast, but I want to say it's really not all that bad, man. I mean, once you get comfortable with your setup, with what you want to talk about to your fan base, you're gonna be all right. So, some things that can help, in your podcast journey or starting your first podcast, you want to come up with topics that you like to talk about. And I want to get into, doing a solo podcast, which is what I'm doing right now. I want to say it's kind of a challenge. Matter of fact, it is a challenge doing a podcast by yourself, because it's like your one man show, basically talking to a whole fan base out there. So you might have a little fears of doing a solo podcast, but to help amp up your podcast. You want to, discuss things of, what you like to do, what your interests are, what you like to talk about. Especially if you're a good talker, if you're a natural extrovert, uh, podcasts will be your thing. You know what I mean? That'll be an excellent platform for you to explore it. So, so doing a solo podcast is challenging because, like I stated earlier, you're doing it all by yourself versus having another partner or, two or three more guests. I think doing a group podcast is more easier versus a solo, but to each his own. It all depends how you go about it and how you look at it, and also how you perceive it. But for me, doing a solo podcast, I'm finding my niche now. Is definitely my thing, and I love it. Hopefully in the future I can, collaborate with other guests out there. I think that'll be a great thing. Talking about different topics and so forth. So I'm gonna be looking forward to that. So another thing what you can do to amp your podcast and starting out in your podcast journey, like I said earlier, you can showcase your art. If you like things like sports, you might want to talk about sports. If you like things like news, if you're a political person, you might want to go into the political field and discuss things that's going on in the world, as such as world culture. It can even be things that's happening in your local neighborhood. You can talk about, if you like going outside, exploring nature, you can be like a naturist podcaster and talk about how you love outside, how you like taking walks outside, maybe photographing beautiful landscapes around your region, as such as what I do in that similar sense right there. So yeah, podcast is a great way to, it also can help you, come up with different ideas. You might want to do a certain theme. Like for instance, there's like major holidays coming up. You might want to do like a Thanksgiving theme. So you see how I have my setup? I have like a very casual setup. You might want to put like a Thanksgiving scene background, or like Christmas that's coming up. You might want to do a Christmas background, put like a Christmas tree in your background. Do things to amp up your podcast so the viewer will be more entertained, I want to say, or, interested in what you want to talk about. So those are things that can also help out your podcast journey, especially if you're doing it all alone. So next segment of this podcast, episode 9. Welcome to the Rob John Podcast. I want to give a big shout out to all the viewers out there, to all the to you who's watching me. Oh man, I want to say I greatly appreciate you, and I thank you for the support. Episode 9. So you already see what I got on, right? I had to bring out the Super Nintendo t-shirt, man. This is the SNES version right here, Super Nintendo Day. Fun day. This is kind of like a fun pod right here. I want to talk about, the Super Nintendo era, just the whole gaming experience. Oh man, I remember days when I used to, stay up at night, watching my cousin play the Super Nintendo. He'll be on his TV screen playing games like Super Mario Brothers. There was another game called Doom. That was another great game. It's like a shooting game. You're going into all these different levels, fighting all these creatures and monsters, and it just looks all, gritty and rugged. The sound instrumentation in that game is like none other. If you like, action-packed type games, check out that game called Doom for Super Nintendo. For the Super Nintendo collectors out there, let me know what kind of games that y'all like. What's your top 5? What's your top 10 games? Leave it in the comments below this podcast right here, or just share it with me however you want to. But I want to get into some games that I like, some of my favorite games. I want to say like my top 3 to 5 games that I like is let me start from least to best. So I'll start with like Mortal Kombat. That's another. I love fighting games. You know what I mean? I remember days, watching my friends playing Mortal Kombat. I remember I always used to like picking Liu Kang. That was like one of my favorite characters, and his one of his signature moves was throwing a fireball. So basically, he'll pull out his 2 hands, and you'll see this fireball coming out of his hands. He also had like that bicycle chain kick. That was another signature move he had. So that was a great character that I like to pick in that game. I think there was another character, Raiden. I used to like picking him. Um, yeah, there's so many characters in that game, man. It's just bringing back so many memories right now. Another game that I like is Street Fighter. I know y'all remember that. I used to like picking Ken and Ryu was basically my 2 favorite characters, and I'm pretty sure they were like favorites of amongst many other gamers out there for that Street Fighter, the game for Super Nintendo. That's another game. I can hear the sounds in that game right now. Oh, you can. Who used to say that? I think it was Ryu, right? Ken was more stoic, man. He was like a more. I remember he had like the whole blonde head. This dude was just jacked. You know what I mean? Just. I remember the stages. It was like they had like different city themes. Like I believe like Tokyo, Japan, just rugged neighborhoods, and they would just be fighting and stuff. I think there was another female character that I liked. Either one or a couple or something like that. Was her name Chung Li? It was something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. She was another great fighter too. Believe it or not, I think they made a movie out of Street Fighter, and I heard that it wasn't all that good. And also same for Mortal Kombat. But I believe there's another newer version of that movie or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, so those are my 2 fighting games that I like. So this is the top 3 that I'm doing off the rip, off the mind. My number 1 favorite game for the Super Nintendo is the whole Donkey Kong series, man. Let me tell you something about that game. Even the graphics, when I play that game now today, the graphics still look amazing for that. I remember playing Donkey Kong Country 1 and just all the visuals. I could just basically see it right now. All the landscapes, and whoever created that game, they did a great job. I think they were like Japan creators or something in that region. But yeah, that's a great game. Just the whole visuals. If you want to be in a relaxed state playing a video game, if you're more of a visual kind of person, you know what I mean? Check out Donkey Kong, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of gamers out there that knows about that game. So I like Donkey Kong 1, and then when Donkey Kong 2 came out, I think that's called Diddy Quest or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong in that as well. But that was another game I liked, and that just outblew part 1. But part 1 of Donkey Kong was still as good. But when part 2 came out, it was like better graphics, better sound. The whole film score of that game is just phenomenal. Still to this day, believe it or not, I'm still listening to instrumentals of Donkey Kong Country 2. There's so many levels in that game. Oh man, it sounds like a soundtrack of your life. You know what I mean? When you hear that music, like some epic kind of film score. Go listen to the instrumentals for Donkey Kong Country 2, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So that's just a brief recap of the games I like for the Super Nintendo. Again, let me know what y'all favorite games out there. I still love the whole retro look of the Super Nintendo. As you can see, the controller on my shirt, the whole gray theme. I remember these buttons. Yep, select, start. Oh man, just an amazing system. And believe it or not, if I stated earlier on one of my social media platforms that if they came out with a revamped version of the Super Nintendo, like coming up with a disc drive and like wireless controllers, something like the PS5 or PS4 or whatever, if they came out with a revamped Super Nintendo, I would definitely get it in a heartbeat, guys. But listen, I'm happy with the collector's original, Super Nintendo, so I'm gonna stick with that. I just love that whole retro feeling of gaming and so forth. And speaking of retro, I want to get into the another subject. Um, just the whole '90s era. How many of y'all come from the '90s? Man, I remember great stories. Growing up in my old neighborhood, I remember clear to this day. It was like beautiful, nice summer days. Going home, watching my mother cook. Such a beautiful soul. She was such a beautiful woman, and still to this day, just watching her cook, coming home from work, she coming home, giving me morals of life. You know what I mean? It was a great journey just to witness that era. And I could remember days staying up late, sneaking out my bedroom to watch the Chicago Bulls play in the '90s and watching my man Michael Jordan do his thing on a basketball court. I'm telling you, '90s was just one of the greatest eras of life, I think. You know what I mean? You had the most historic things happening, such as what I just stated of, the most iconic basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan, doing his thing on the court and just putting a staple in the game in the sport of basketball as well. And you had guys like Mike Tyson in the '90s era, just knocking fighters out left and right. In fact, I was able to go see Mike Tyson in my hometown. He came by in Albany, New York, and he went to a center building in the downtown area, and I got a chance to meet him. I didn't really say hi to him, but I remember I looked back and I seen Mike Tyson sitting right behind me. So basically, I just gave him like a little warrior nod. He gave me the nod back, and I was good with that. So, because I was looking forward to meeting him and taking a picture with him, but it was so many people that wanted to, take a picture with him. But just the nod alone from Tyson was good enough for me, man. I think I actually shared this story earlier when Tyson came up to, talk about, his sport of boxing and how he started. And I think they actually gave him like some rewards of, what he did for the game of boxing or the sport of boxing as well. So Mike Tyson is a humble dude. Shout out to you, Mike. Keep doing your thing. Believe it or not, he has a great podcast show called Hot Boxing. You can check that out. He has a lot of great content on that podcast show. One thing about Mike that I like, that he's always dropping gems, because considering the fact where he came from, from the rough areas and neighborhoods that he came from, he always talks about how he was able to move on in his life, and he uses those stories, to tell the viewers out there from what he came from. And you can see what a great man that he is today from those stories that he told. So once again, shout out to Mike Tyson, and thank you for being a great staple in the sport of boxing. So yeah, gotta take a sip of water real quick. So yeah, back to the whole '90s era. Even like listening to music back in the day, the '90s era was like one of the best, especially for hip hop and rap. I remember listening to groups like Criss Cross. One of my favorite songs called "Jump." Going in my old neighborhood, I could hear that song playing in a avenue right there. Cars going by with the booming system. Another song by LL Cool J, which came out, I believe, in the early '90s or the late '80s, believe it or not. LL Cool J has been out for years. Another iconic artist right there. I think, believe it or not, one of my cousins put me on to Criss Cross and their music. I remember they had the whole backwards theme, and I used to think it was cool to wear my clothes backwards and going to school like that in the '90s. Oh man, great times right there. So the whole '90s era, Even going to school in those days, just being able to, you know what I mean? Growing up with certain of your friends and so forth, and just the whole school era, man. Just a beautiful era, and just to reflect back on. So yeah, Super Nintendo in the 1990s era. So I'm going to recap this show, episode 9. So basically, I'm talking about starting your own podcast and giving advice of how I do my podcast so it can help others out there who want to create their first podcast show. And also, talking about topics and stuff and what you like to talk about in your podcast as well. And going on into the whole SNES theme, talking about that and recapping it with the 90s era. So this is episode 9. Once again, I want to give a shout out to all the viewers out there. Shout out to all the listeners out there. You guys keep doing your thing in life. Keep shining. Don't give up. If you got a dream, if you got a vision, go for it, man. Forget about the haters. Forget about the naysayers. Listen, they're going to laugh at you. They may not understand your vision. They may not understand why you're doing the things you're doing to create visions and ideas. But so what, man? You know what you got to do. You know what you want to do. If you want something in life, you got to go for it. That's what my mom used to always tell me all the time, man. I can hear my mom saying that to me right now, matter of fact. Shout out to my moms. Love you, baby girl. But if you want something in life, go for it, man. Continue to move on. If you got the vision, if you want to become a visionary, that's what you see yourself as, then by any means, go for it, man. So once again, keep shining in life. You can follow me also on my social media sites. I'm on IG, Rob John Photo. You know what I mean? Rob John Music. Check me out on my YouTube, The Rob Pod. Thank you for tuning in. Check out my website, www.robjohnmusic.com. You know what I mean? You guys keep shining out there. Keep doing your thing. I'm going to sign out. Continue to enjoy life. Yo, I'm out. It's your boy, Robbo. Take care. Rob John Podcast. Peace.